As we continue this afternoon, I will invite Kevin O'Brien to come and read the eulogy.
Well, again, everybody, welcome. And thank you for the gift of your presence here today. Thank you for showing up for your love and support for Michelle and the girls and the whole family, and your memories of Scott. In times like this, just the simple act of gathering together is an act of love. And so again, thank you for coming. Scott Ries was a big man, well over 6 foot and built to match. He had the kind of presence that filled a doorway before he even said a word. And people who didn't know him will admit now that he could be intimidating clear across the room. But everyone who actually knew him tells the same story with a laugh. Underneath all that size was a teddy bear. That contradiction was the whole man. Because whether he was wearing a badge or standing at the boat launch on Lake Erie before sunrise, Scott spent his life doing one thing: keeping the peace. Not just enforcing it, but keeping it in his community, on his team, at home around the family table. He always wanted things to go smoothly. He wanted people safe and happy, and he was willing to plant himself in the middle of whatever mess was going on in order to make that happen. He grew up in Chippewa the way a lot of kids did before phones took over everything, outside in the woods. There were woods right behind the house where he and his brother Kevin lived, where they spent more or less their entire summer there, unless football or chores called them away. But he was a gifted athlete. He ran track and played football. He even held down first base in men's softball. Somehow quick and light on his feet despite already being the biggest kid on the field. Then in the last game or two of his senior football season, he tore his ACL. And the talk of a scholarship went out the door. But Scott adjusted the way he did to most things in his life. He simply moved on. He moved forward. Summers also meant a cabin at a place called Apple Valley, where he and Kevin kept their own little boat and fished the days away. And that tradition lasted until the family sold the cabin partway through his high school years, when sports and jobs and growing up took over the calendar instead. But it planted something in him for the rest of his life. He found his way to Hocking College down in the hills near Logan, Ohio, to study police science. And it was there that he met a nursing student named Michelle Carpenter. On May 10th, 1997, in her hometown of Logan, he married her, and for 29 years, she stood beside a man who never did anything halfway. He built his career with the same sleeves rolled up seriousness. He spent nearly 2 decades with the Wayne County Sheriff's Office before joining the Rittman Police Department in 2015, where he rose to sergeant and took on the job of training the next generations of officers behind him. He served on SWAT, took on special investigations, and carried genuine pride in seeing the department and the people they served come out on the other side of every call a little bit better than they went in. Those who worked beside him reached for words like protector, courageous, and dedicated, though the word his daughters returned to most often without hesitation was simply supportive. Around the department, he was known affectionately as something of a shit magnet. The kind of sergeant who somehow always seemed to be right in the middle of it whenever the shift went sideways. Not because trouble followed him, but because that's where he believed a leader was supposed to be. In the days since he died, neighbors and strangers alike have stopped his family just to say how Scott helped them through a hard stretch of their life. He would look them in the eye and tell them to just keep going and to do better. Whatever he happened to be doing at that moment, he had a way of making you feel that nothing else in the world mattered except for you right then. If Scott had one thing he wanted the officers he led to carry forward, it was this: look out for one another. See the bigger picture and make sure that everyone is supported in appropriate ways. Do what's right, even when it isn't the popular choice, because the job is never about one person. It's about the team and about the community that team has sworn to protect. That standard mattered just as much to him at home. It was important to him that his own daughters learned to do what's right unselfishly, to think of what's best for the team rather than what's best for themselves alone, because he had built his whole life around that rule. That same instinct showed up in smaller ways that nobody kept score of: clearing a neighbor's driveway when they didn't even ask, splitting and hauling wood for someone who needed it, showing up with a truck when a job needed some extra hands. He gave that same energy to the Doylestown Lions Club whenever they needed him, quietly becoming the kind of person a community learns to lean on without ever once making a production of it. That same attention followed him home every night. Scott and Michelle raised two amazing daughters, Abby and Maddie, and he made sure that their childhoods were full of softball fields and whatever else their hearts desired. He loved being a softball dad, coaching Abby's youth teams and Maddie's team through the Ohio Stampede Travel League, which meant summers built entirely around 4 a.m. wake-up calls and McDonald's drive-through on the way to some tournament 3 hours from home, a ritual that the family still laughs about today. Later, you would find him standing on the sidelines at the Chippewa Middle School's football field as a volunteer coach, teaching kids the same game that he loved for so many years. Michelle coached middle school cheer and at the very same seasons that he was coaching football. And so between the two of them, hardly a Friday night went by that both of them weren't needed somewhere, running a concession stand or hauling equipment for the booster club. Scott wasn't, by his own admission, much of a cheer dad, but he showed up anyway, every single time. His daughters will tell you that he was the kind of father who never ran out of answers. When Abby moved into her first apartment, she woke to find it overrun with bees, 3 of them. And so she panicked and she called her dad, who did not panic, but he told her exactly what to do, step by step, calm as still water, the way he always was when someone needed him to be. That was Scott as a parent, even-keeled, endlessly patient, the person you could call on when your world was falling apart around you, knowing that he would hand you a plan instead of fear. He loved nothing more than the standing invitation lunch that he had with Abby and her fiancé, Alex. Al's was their place, and he showed up every chance he got. He was already looking forward to their wedding, and just as eager to watch Maddie cross the stage with her nursing degree, the way he'd watched Abby graduate. But Scott's love and care grew even wider as he delighted in watching his niece and nephew Shelby and Trace grow into the amazing people that they are becoming. Outside of work and family, Scott's whole heart lived outdoors. He hunted deer and turkey every season without fail, and there is, by his family's own count, a deer head hanging in almost every room in their house. Not as trophies so much as a record of the hours that he spent outdoors with the people that he loved. He'd learned to hunt as a boy, tagging along with his own father through Saturday rabbit seasons because Sundays were off limits and every other day belonged to the dogs in the fields. He passed that same gift down without hesitation, taking his daughters hunting and fishing when they were small and taking their friends too, along with the neighborhood kids and anyone else who was interested in coming along. Because, as Michelle put it, he simply enjoyed sharing his passions with other people. In recent years, that generosity found a new home on Lake Erie. Scott bought a boat, and the word got around fast. He could have run a charter, but he never once charged a soul. He just wanted the company, and he wanted people to have the experience of being out on the water. Again, neighbors, their friends, friends of friends. It never mattered who. If you were willing to help run the tackle and pull in your limit, Scott had the boat gassed and ready before the sun came up. He took his own birthday off every year in November for a whole week because November meant deer season, and there was no better way in his mind to mark another year than to spend it exactly where he was happiest, out in the woods or standing at the rail of that boat. At home, evenings meant a campfire and a game of Guess That Tune, and if his brother Kevin and nephew happened to be playing music somewhere, Scott made sure that he was there to hear it. He'd taken up smoking meat and grilling with the same seriousness that he brought to everything else. He hosted pizza cook-offs with his friends and traded barbecue tips like trade secrets. He would even cut and split his own wood as much for exercise as for the wood itself, the kind of man who would rather spend an evening watching chainsaw reviews on YouTube than sit around doing nothing. Scott had become, to his family's great amusement, something of a YouTube regular, too, forever queued up with a history podcast or an outdoor show, and his phone was practically glued to his hand, while his family teased him as being their own personal chatty Cathy, because there was rarely a stretch of the day that he wasn't mid-conversation with somebody. Ask around and you'll find almost everybody has a favorite Scott story, usually something a little ridiculous, a little larger than life because of some fresh piece of shenanigans he'd found himself in the middle of, at work or off duty, that everyone laughing is still laughing about it years later. He had strong opinions about a good meal, too. Al and Cranston's were his two favorite places to take friends, and he'd order the same thing nearly every time, sausage and green beans, though he was just as happy with a good steak or a pork chop the size of your face. And for a man who spent his whole career keeping his composure in genuinely dangerous situations, Scott had exactly two things that could rattle him: bananas and a tomato. Ask his family about the salad that once arrived at Bob Evans with a whole tomato sitting on top of it, and you'll get the same story every time. As Michelle watched his expression start to shift, and she watched it build until she calmly said to the server, "We're good," before he could say a word. He was, by his own household's fond description, a full-grown teddy bear who could stare down real danger without blinking and be entirely undone by a tomato. Family for Scott meant showing up. It meant the pig roast that the Ries clan hosted every summer for years, a tradition that he'd carried north like a piece of home. or the crab boil when the pig roast wasn't in the cards. It meant the handful of summers his own family made to the Outer Banks, where he discovered his love of crabbing almost as much as he loved being on the water at home. It meant building a pond at his house where he and Michelle raised their daughters, because for reasons never fully explained, it mattered to him to have that same kind of stillness close to home. And it meant a dog at his feet. He was a lifelong German Shepherd man, but when his daughter left her golden doodle at the house one visit, the two of them became inseparable, proof that Scott's loyalty never checked a pedigree. And speaking of German Shepherds, I was heartened to hear that Vic is home and recovering, so our prayers continue with him. Yes, Scott filled a room the way big men do, but it was never about his size that people remember. It was about the size of the space that he made for everybody standing in it. 6 foot something in life, and somehow larger than that in every memory left behind. At home, there's a boat that still isn't going anywhere for a while. It sits exactly where Scott always kept it, gassed up and ready long before sunrise, waiting on someone to climb aboard. That readiness was the whole of him, really. The invitation was always extended to neighbors and strangers and anyone who needed a reason to get outside for a few hours. When Michelle was asked what Scott would most want people to hold on to, she didn't have to think long. Value your family, value your friendships, and spend time with the people you love while you have them. So take the boat out, sit by the fire, do the things that are your passion, and do them with the people who matter to you, and make good choices along the way, because that, in the end, was the only thing that Scott ever really asked of anyone. Not accomplishment, just presence. Not achievement, just showing up for each other, the way he showed up for a lifetime of the people who needed him. Scott spent 54 years making sure that everyone got that experience. Thank you for being some of them. The boat is still at home, waiting for you. The invitation is still open. And carrying him forward now means the rest of us finally climbing on board.